On the 28th of March in the year 193, the Roman Empire, the largest, richest, most powerful state the world had ever seen, was put up for sale. Not metaphorically, not through some backroom deal between senators, an actual auction, with bidders, shouted numbers, a winner. The men selling it were the emperor's own bodyguards. His body was still warm in the palace behind them. And the price of the world came down to a single question. How much is a soldier's loyalty worth? The answer, it turns out, was 25,000 sesterces a man. This is the story of the strangest day in Roman history, and the terrible price the buyers paid. To understand how an empire ends up on the auction block, you have to understand what came before it. For 84 years, Rome had been ruled well. Historians call it the age of the five good emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius. Each chose his successor on merit, adopting the best man he could find rather than trusting to blood. Then Marcus Aurelius did what none of them had done. He had a son. Commodus was 19 when he inherited the world. He spent the next 12 years spending it. He renamed Rome after himself, Colonia Commodiana. He renamed the months. He fought in the arena as a gladiator, charging the treasury 1,000,000 sesterces per appearance. He had statues of himself erected as Hercules, club in hand, lion skin over his shoulder. On the last night of the year 192, his wrestling partner strangled him in his bath. What happened next mattered more than the murder, because there was no plan, no heir, no adopted successor waiting in the wings. There was only the Praetorian Guard. 9,000 men garrisoned in a fortress inside the city walls, the Castra Praetoria. They were the only armed force in Rome. Their original purpose was to protect the emperor. Over 2 centuries, they had quietly discovered a more profitable purpose, choosing him. They had done it before. When Caligula was murdered in 41 AD, it was a Praetorian who found Caligula's uncle Claudius hiding behind a curtain. And it was the guard who made him emperor in exchange for 15,000 sesterces a man. They had learned the lesson. An emperor who owes you his throne pays well. So on the first day of 193, they made a new one. His name was Publius Helvius Pertinax. He was 66 years old, the son of a freed slave, a former schoolteacher who had risen through the army to become the most respected man in Rome. On paper, the perfect choice. He was, in practice, a disaster for the men who chose him. Pertinax found the treasury empty. Commodus had spent it. So the new emperor did what responsible men do and refused to spend money he did not have. He had promised each Praetorian 12,000 sesterces. He paid half. Then he made it worse. He sold off Commodus's slaves, his gladiators, his silks and gold plate, and auctioned them publicly to raise funds. He cut spending. He tried to reform the guard itself, to make soldiers behave like soldiers again. He lasted 87 days. On March the 28th, roughly 300 Praetorians left their fortress and marched on the palace in broad daylight. The palace staff did not resist. Some of them opened the doors. Pertinax could have run. Instead, he walked out to meet them and tried to reason with them. An old man in a purple cloak, explaining to armed men why they should not do the thing they had already decided to do. One of them threw a spear. They cut off his head, stuck it on a lance, and carried it back through the streets of Rome to the Castra Praetoria. And then they realized they had a problem. They had killed an emperor, and they had no one to replace him. What happened next is recorded by Cassius Dio, a Roman senator who was in the city that day and who wrote that he was ashamed to have to describe it. The Praetorians climbed the walls of their fortress and made an announcement to the people of Rome. The empire was for sale. The throne would go to whoever offered the soldiers the most money. There were 2 bidders. The first was Titus Flavius Sulpicianus, the urban prefect, and Pertinax's own father-in-law. He was already inside the camp, sent there to calm the soldiers and recover the body of the man they had just murdered. He began to bid. The second was Didius Julianus, a wealthy senator, very wealthy, a former consul, a man whose ambition had outlived his reputation. He was at dinner when the news reached him. According to Dio, his wife and daughter urged him to go. He arrived at the walls of the Castra Praetoria, found the gates shut against him, and began shouting his offer up to the soldiers on the ramparts. And so the Roman Empire was auctioned between a man inside the fortress and a man standing outside it, with the guard running messages between them, driving the price up. Sulpicianus offered 20,000 sesterces per man. Julianus did not bid 21. He understood exactly what he was buying, and he understood that soldiers respond to a gesture. He jumped straight to 25,000 and shouted up that he would restore the memory of Commodus, whom the guard had loved. 25,000 sesterces. For 9,000 men, that was 225 million sesterces, several years of the entire tax revenue of Roman Egypt. The gates opened. Didius Julianus was proclaimed Emperor of Rome on the same evening the last emperor's head had gone by on a spear. He should have paid attention to the crowd. When Julianus went to the Senate under armed escort, the people of Rome lined the streets and jeered him. They called him a thief and a parricide. They shouted the name of a general far away on the Danube, Septimius Severus. The Senate confirmed him. They had little choice. The guard was in the room, but the empire outside Rome did not. Within weeks, 3 men had been proclaimed emperor by their own legions. Pescennius Niger in Syria, Clodius Albinus in Britain, and Septimius Severus in Pannonia, commanding 16 legions and standing closest to Rome. Severus did not negotiate. He announced that he was marching on the city to avenge Pertinax, and he moved fast, faster than anyone expected, crossing the Alps while Julianus was still trying to work out what was happening. Julianus tried everything. He declared Severus a public enemy. He sent assassins. They failed. He sent senators to persuade Severus's troops to desert. They joined Severus instead. He ordered the Praetorians to fortify the city and discovered that the men who had sold him the empire had no intention of dying for it. They were parade ground soldiers. They had not dug a trench in a century. Finally, in desperation, he offered to share the throne. Severus did not reply. On the 1st of June, the Senate, sensing which way the wind blew, sentenced Didius Julianus to death and proclaimed Severus emperor. A soldier found Julianus alone in the palace. He had ruled for 66 days. Cassius Dio records his last words, and they may be the most Roman thing in this entire story. But what evil have I done? Whom have I killed? He genuinely did not understand. He had not murdered anyone. He had simply bought, at a fair price in an open auction, a thing that was being sold. That was the problem. Severus entered Rome and dealt with the Praetorian Guard. He did not massacre them. He did something more humiliating. He summoned them to a parade outside the city, unarmed, in dress uniform, expecting a donative from the new emperor. Then he surrounded them with his own legionaries. He stripped them of their ceremonial daggers, tore the decorations from their uniforms, and dismissed every one of them from the army. They were forbidden to come within 100 miles of Rome on pain of death. He reformed the guard from his own frontier troops, men from the Danube who had never seen the capital. The men who had sold the world walked home with nothing. And the empire had learned something it could never unlearn, that the throne was not sacred and not inherited and not earned. It was purchasable. Whoever held the swords set the price. In the century that followed, Rome went through more than 50 emperors and claimants. Most died violently, most were killed by their own soldiers. The auction of 193 lasted a few hours. The lesson it taught lasted 300 years. If you want to know how that ends, the story of the century Rome spent tearing itself apart, that's next. Subscribe, and we'll take it from here.